Well, greetings everyone, and welcome to the opening of the latest Read Gallery exhibition entitled Essie Summers, New Zealand's Queen of Romance. My name's Julian Smith, by the way. I'm the Read librarian here, an acting heritage librarian. I'm honoured to be the MC tonight for the opening of our Essie Summers exhibition. It's a special occasion because several relatives of Essie are present tonight, including her two children, Elizabeth and William. A special thank you to my co-curator and our speaker tonight, Ruth Williamson, for her immense input into the exhibition. The lion's share of the knowledge behind the exhibition certainly comes from Ruth. A special thank you also to Kathleen McCarthy for considerable curatorial assistance, especially with the novels, of which she retains a remarkable memory. Thanks also to Jasmine from the bindery, Casey for the graphic design, and Malcolm for some tricky photography. And now to introduce our speaker today, Ruth Williamson. Now, Ruth joined the committee of the Dunedin Public Libraries Association last year and has coordinated their project about Essie Summers. Ruth is a member of the Jane Austen Society of North America and is actively involved with the Jane Austen Society of Australia as the editor of its newsletter, The Chronicle. She has also contributed to literary events and activities in Australia, Canada, California, and the United Kingdom. Closer to home, she has presented papers at two Centre of the Book symposia here in Dunedin, and her subject last year was Essie Summers herself. So that's enough from me from now. Over to Ruth.
First of all, thank you so much to Julian and to Kath in particular, with whom I've worked very closely. We've had some wonderful times reminiscing about the novels, and all the library heritage team for staging this particular exhibition. I'm really delighted to be able to talk about Essie and to acknowledge the huge contribution made by her family, who have supplied so many exhibits for us. At last, the significance of Essie Summers' work is being recognised in a series of events. This is the first one of a series. And tonight, I'll try to sketch her career in terms of seasons, no surprises probably, so that you can see what inspired this exhibition. Her very first poem to be published was called Gypsy Heart, and it appeared in the Australian Woman's Mirror in 1931. It's on display in the gallery in a volume of her collected poems collated by the author herself for her family. And I think it's fitting to start this talk with poetry because that's how she started. Here's a verse that she addressed to spring, the season when new life begins. It's just an extract. What shall I say of spring? There are no words fit to portray her peerless loveliness. She wakes the sombre hills from winter sleep, and where her joyous footsteps lightly press the waiting earth, there stirs with pulsing life brown, shriveled bulbs deep underneath the sod, and daffodils burst into dancing gold to sing a fitting hymn of praise to God. Essie was born in 1912 in Christchurch, my hometown, and she was educated there. She became a keen reader and writer, but she needed to leave school at the age of 14 to earn a living. Times were tough. She worked in draperies in Christchurch, including London Town Drapers and Miss Sparks Fashion House. They were both iconic Christchurch businesses. And she continued to write in her own free time. She believed in what she wrote, and also in what she called the magic of springtime, with its promise for the future. The importance of the seasons lasted for her. As a writer, she knew about what happened and when in the natural world. In her novel, Seasons of Forgetfulness, she passed on to her readers some tips about how to use seasons in writing. So her heroine says the following: "You know your farming and mountain backgrounds backwards, but as you bring in the pioneer women's work a lot and their gardens, I've done this date and season list with summer, autumn, winter and spring, with details of what's blooming or ripening when. I'd like later to record approximate temperatures, times of sunrise, sunset and tides too, quicker than having to pause in a fine flow of narrative and look these things up." So Essie used a homemade calendar notebook, really like an almanac. And this was a very personal choice of hers, and it shows in her novels. She wrote about this as a mature writer, but as a young woman, novels were still a dream for the future. In May 1940, she married the Reverend Bill Flett. While based at Western Parish in the 1950s, Essie began to write advice columns for the Timaru Herald under the pen name of Tamsin. She kept very busy balancing lots of parish work, home life with 2 young, lively children, and also writing poems, articles and short stories. Writer Pauline Cartwright, nee Webster, captured Essie's life there in an article published in the Parish Centenary magazine, and it's here on display, together with Essie's book dedicated to Pauline, and after she too was published, Pauline's book dedicated to Essie. They returned the compliment. But in the early 1950s, Essie was yet to see her prose published in the United Kingdom. Her poetry had appeared there. So she was thrilled when the Scots magazine published an article of hers in 1954. It was non-fiction, and the subject was Jane Burns, later Bannerman, a daughter of the Reverend Thomas Burns. Need I say more? Essie happened privately upon Jane's diary about her early life in Scotland and felt she was actually with little Jane in Ayrshire while she was reading and writing about her. You can view a copy of at least the beginning of that special article in our exhibition. It was an important milestone in her growth as a writer. By 1957, she was refining and revising her first novel to be published. Alan Boone, her publisher, explained that he wanted to stress its New Zealand setting, so the title became New Zealand Inheritance, and he advised Essie to highlight the world of the Southern Hemisphere. Of course, that included the reversal of northern seasons. She certainly put his advice into practice. In her novel Spring in September, the season offers the heroine an opportunity for a new beginning. Before she returns to New Zealand from the United Kingdom, she observes as follows: "September was a lovely month all over the world. Irresistibly, her thoughts turned to the Southern Hemisphere, to another Canterbury, a province, turned to memories of New Zealand Septembers, where daffodils would crowd the banks of the Avon in Christchurch, and soon cherry blossom would deck the boughs. In the Millbrook Reserve, crocuses would carpet the turf with mauve and white and gold chalices." And later in the same novel, she thinks about other seasons. Spring was a lovely time, of course, sap rising, buds bursting, nature being prodigal with leaf and bloom. But in the cycle of the year, September gave way to summer days, full of mature blossom. She'd once said she loved autumn best. What would have happened come autumn in April, she wondered. So there's a link here to some other novels in her work, in her working life. In time, she supplied each season with its very own novel. After the success of her debut with New Zealand Inheritance, her life as a novelist was underway, and the spring of her career matured into summer. Now, in the summer of Essie's writing life, she settled into the regular production of novels and her full flowering as a writer. She had already expressed her feelings about summer Christmases in verse. And I quote a portion here from a poem called Christmas Wish. Here, in this land beneath the Southern Cross, I wake on Christmas morn to summer skies, while on the still, sweet air from bushland haunts the songs of bellbirds and of tuis rise. When she wrote her novel Summer in December, she was on a visit to the UK, and she could really say that the Northern Hemisphere felt like a topsy-turvy world to her. But before that overseas trip, she had stayed at Lilybank Station, beyond the head of Lake Tekapo. Her heroine in the novel, Joanna, spends time on a remote sheep station there, and she considers Northern versus Southern hemispheres. She thinks even the seasons would be different. By December, she would be back in England, and it would be the season of bare trees, mist, rain, low temperatures, and here it would be high summer. Hard to imagine. Fancy having Christmas in summertime. The roses would be out, and in the shingle on the mountainsides, basking in sun, the mountain lilies would bloom, fragile and white. Vivid seasonal descriptions, yes, but Summers actually broke new ground when she described real locations. She renamed only individual stations or farms or very small settlements to protect the real people living there. She used a well-worn road map book and marked the location for each of her novels in it. You can see that annotated map book in the exhibition, and all her novels are grouped to show where they are set. Since she connected real places with their names, it's no wonder that readers were keen to see them for themselves. This produced an offshoot. It promoted New Zealand tourism, what I like to call the Essie Summers effect. Tourists came to visit her settings, to trace routes from place to place, and they hoped to meet the author at home. Some called for an Essie Summers tour to be set up. For many years, her home was very close by, in Preston Crescent, Balmouse. Her children went to high school in Dunedin, I hope that's correct.
Correct.
Yes. And they grew up with a best-selling author. Don't miss the talks on Saturday when they will describe what it was like to have a successful writer in the family and the people they met as a result. Essie also loved to travel to different areas, and they would later turn up in her novels. She travelled by car with her family. On days off too, she'd pack a picnic, and while she would, at a suitable stopping place, jot like madly on her jotter pads, her husband would paint some of the landscapes that she was describing in words. Two of his rather good oil paintings of the Mount Cook and Glenorchy areas are included in our exhibition. Essie's regular output was 3 new novels per year. Each one took 3 months to write and revise. She shared her approach to writing with many others. She spoke to groups, to schools and elsewhere. She corresponded with other writers, and she gave to support to those who were just starting out, as in the case of Pauline Cartwright. Essie gave several interviews on radio and television, and her novels were translated into other languages, including German. 2 German editions are on display here. She received letters from readers abroad, and an Essie Summers Appreciation Society was born in New Zealand. A newsletter from the society is on show. After her husband retired from looking after his own parish, they travelled to the UK and to Europe. Her book's success made that possible. She'd always wanted to visit the UK, and on her very first trip there, she actually met her publisher, Alan Boone, and he arranged a tour, so she met many enthusiastic readers, both male and female. She was inspired to write her autobiography, published in 1974. It was produced in both serial and book forms, and both formats we have here on display. In it, she told her story to date, and it was well seasoned with personal and family anecdotes. Her novels continued to sell well, each new title adding to her success. In time, of course, she reached her own autumn years. She always loved autumn best and composed many lines about it, including these. Do you wait to see the moonlight silver all the harvest field? Do you wonder at the riches of the golden autumn yield? Are the willows turning yellow? Are the apples showing red? Do the storm clouds ever gather? Is there thunder overhead? Of course, there was also her novel called Autumn and April, of course. And I quote, "It had turned chilly, something that made Rosamond realise autumn did indeed come in April. Already the English trees in the town belt that girdled the 7 hills of this gracious city," yes, it's Dunedin, "were splashing great daubs of red and yellow and russet among the native trees, and the harbour and the open sea held the deep blue tinge of the changing season." And in Central Otago, another place very close to Essie's heart, one's eyes lifted to the paradise outside. The willows, rusty brown now, clustered symmetrically about the edge of the lake. The poplars grew brighter every day, looking as if some artist had painted them thickly with oils, as golden as the molten sun itself, as if all the gold of the region, deep down and unobtainable, had transformed itself into living metal. Typically there, she's emphasising the vibrant colours and textures of her favourite season, rather than any negative foreshadowing of winter. By the mid-1980s, she was in her own 70s. She moved north with her husband to Napier. She had told Alan Boone she would not be writing more novels for him. His letter, regretfully accepting her decision, is on display, as is her own letter addressed "Dear Reader," announcing a halt to new novels. But being Essie, she was far from idle. She explored her family history, made friends in her new location, and kept in touch with the fan club. In 1995, she told them a further novel, South Horizon Man, was in the press, from 7 House this time. In her autumn years, she kept writing. After autumn, of course, winter must follow. Back in the 1930s, she paid tribute to winter in one of her jumble books, as she called them. She kept clippings and inspirational material in these scrapbooks, and the earliest example that we know of to survive is on display in the tall cabinet right over there. It includes her response to winter. Thank you for winter. It flings so much beauty into relief, beauty that we might not count otherwise. 1,000,000 birds sing in spring. For one in winter, I give thanks. Naturally, she also explored winter in her novels, No Roses in June from 1962 includes this very short exchange. So you do have ice in June in this topsy-turvy country. Yes, and roses in December. The author had wanted Roses in December for her title, but someone else had taken it. 20 years later, she wrote Winter in July, and her hero says this: long ago, we had an old Scots shepherd who said he'd never got used to Christmas in summer, Easter in autumn, and spring in September. He reckoned July and August, when sometimes among the Alps we saw only snow with no ground showing if the falls had been heavy, seemed quite unreal to him. Summers' final books, beginning with South Horizon Man, were written after she became a widow. She continued to be creative, wrote more verse, kept in touch with her fan club, and still gave talks about writing. She had honed that particular presentation over the years, and the exhibition includes a personalised manuscript copy, thanks to Elizabeth. While Essie died in 1998, her books are still being read. There continue to be enthusiastic fans from the US, the UK and elsewhere. Copies are becoming scarce, and some readers have requested electronic editions. Watch the space in that connection. The exhibition has a case that we've called Essie Lives On. Of course, her novels do so. In 2015, a retirement village in Christchurch adopted her name. A campaign to recognise her work grew here in Dunedin, with photos, articles and letters to the editor of the ODT. When the City of Literature set up its excellent Detour app, it supplied details of Essie's contribution to the literary scene of Dunedin. This exhibition celebrates her life and work, and on Saturday she'll have a plaque on the Writers Walk at last. The Friends of the Library have promoted that project, but I also want to acknowledge the support of the City of Literature, the Council, Dunedin Public Library staff, and the Alexander Macmillan Trust in making things happen. It's been said that Essie's novels stand out because of their sense of place, and that's true. Her characters, young and old, demonstrate the author's love of New Zealand. At the same time, I'd add to that a sense of the cycle of life. In her novels, she expresses love for every season of the year, as she knew each one, at home and abroad. Welcome to the season of summers. Thanks.